Did you know that in 1910, 90% of people baked their own bread? And now today, less than 5% of people do. It's crazy. 100 years ago, everyone baked bread. Now no one does. There's something about fresh baked bread.
Bread and communion wine.
Really, the process to make a loaf of bread is not that difficult. It just takes time. You know when you get to the end of your pickle jar and you've got leftover pickle juice? You know how you get to the bottom of the pickle jar and there's all that juice left? I'm going to show you what to do with it by making some dill pickle rye bread. First, I'd like to give a shout out to Stu at Brine Pickles. Dill pickle bread. As always, the recipe's down at the bottom. And like and subscribe. You ever had a dill pickle rye bread? It's got kind of a little bit of that tangy, goes great with ham. Anyway, let's get started. Okay, we've got 400 grams of bread flour and then 50 grams of rye flour. Now, you can adjust this if you want, if you like a little more rye, but I wouldn't add more than 100 grams of rye because then the bread is going to become too dense. So I found that a 400 gram to 50 gram ratio is kind of the best solution for me personally. I like a lighter rye. And then I've got 2.5 teaspoons of yeast. Now you can add this directly to the dry ingredients. You know, a lot of people say, oh, you need to bloom the yeast, the yeast, but really the granules in this yeast is so fine that it's going to do just fine in getting going. So you really don't need to bloom it. Just dump it in. Just give it a quick mix. And then 9 grams of salt. I have 1.5 teaspoons of caraway. If you don't like caraway, leave it out. And then I've got some mustard powder here. Adds a little color to the bread and gives it a little depth of character. If you don't like mustard powder, leave it out. This is 1 teaspoon of mustard powder and 1 tablespoon of sugar. Then just mix the dry ingredients a little bit. Again, you can do this all by hand. It just takes a little while longer. I like to start with the paddle attachment on the mixer. You know what? I like a fermented dill pickle. And these are my favorite. Brine! Brine! Stu, you make a good pickle. On to our wet ingredients. We've got 170 grams of pickle juice. Brine! And then 170 grams of warm water. Usually about 115 degrees, I think, is the best temperature. Anywhere between 110 and 115 degrees. The reason why you want to have it a little bit warmer is that you want to get that yeast to start going. So pour that in. And I'm not putting any milk in this bread, and so we want to put a little fat. I've got 50 grams of just vegetable oil. And mix until a dough forms. I have it just on speed 1, and then I'll slowly ramp up the speed of the mixer. And again, you can do this by hand. It just takes a little time. Usually takes about 20 minutes to mix it by hand. And then when the dough starts pulling away from the bowl, you switch to the dough hook attachment. This process usually takes about 2 or 3 minutes. Just removing the dough from the paddle attachment. Just like to scrape down the sides just a little bit. And then we're going to switch and use the dough hook. We're going to knead this dough for about 8 minutes on setting 4 on this mixer, so about halfway. A medium speed.
America, let's pause Bridgerton for a moment. Chuck out that 100th redo of Emma. Put down that reread of Pride and Prejudice. And let's focus on the drama that's happening right here in Washington, D.C. This is a true story.
This is potent stuff. I can't stop drinking it. This might be trouble. It is a good cocktail. The last word cocktail. The year is 1875. The place, our nation's capital. Dearest viewers, the time has come to place our bets for the upcoming social season, but wary is the consideration for U.S. Attorney General George H. Williams and his nomination to the U.S. Supreme Court. For troubles afoot for Mr. Williams, both at home and at work. His ever-charming bride, Kate George Hughes, has soured amongst Washington society. For some, the aim may be high, but the fall is mighty. Mr. Williams, originally from Iowa, was a rising star in the Grant administration for having gone from Chief Justice in some backwaters of the Oregon Territory, only to now be nominated to the highest position in the highest court of the land, Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court. How does he do it? His blushing bride, Miss Williams nee George nee Hughes, also from Iowa, is Mr. Williams' second wife, his first wife having died tragically back in Oregon. Kate George Hughes is ever the social climber, shapely and tall, a woman of surpassing beauty. Her father, Ross B. Hughes, a wealthy Iowa copperman, once boasted that Kate could marry any of the greatest men in America. Now, Mr. Williams was not her first husband, nor her second. He just happened to be her divorce attorney in the divorce proceedings of her first marriage. A marriage, I might add, which was not to a great man, but hastily prepared as she was with child. That marriage ended in infidelity, her child disappearing with her former husband. She marries again, and this second marriage makes her a widow. So whispers abound when Kate's sister, living in Portland, beckons Kate, still in mourning, to make the arduous journey from Iowa to Oregon by wagon train, just as Mr. Williams, her former divorce attorney himself, was returning to Portland, having been recently elected senator of the newly formed state of Oregon. George Williams, himself a widower, found Kate slight relief to his own heavy heart. She, always the charmer, Kate elevated every Portland dinner party. They wed in the summer of 1867. Now, hoedown and frontier fare are fun, but the real movers and shakers are in Washington, D.C. So the newlyweds made quick haste back to the court of Washington as fast as carriage could carry them. Mr. Williams' stock was on the rise. Having entered the Senate in the waning days of the Civil War, he becomes quite the influential man for both Northerner and Southerner alike, drafting both the 14th Amendment and instrumental in the impeachment of President Johnson. And Mrs. Williams' Kate is taken to host lavish parties of their residence, regaling stories of the Oregon frontier. President Grant and his wife Julia are counted amongst their closest friends, with the Williams dining at the White House on several occasions. So it is no surprise in 1871 that George H. Williams was elevated to Attorney General in the Grant cabinet. What was not known, dear viewer, was that for this elevation, Mrs. Williams thought it prudent to flaunt her newly upgraded political status as cabinet member's wife over the wives of lesser officials, especially the senators' wives. So when President Grant nominated her husband to the Supreme Court of the land, a laudable groan was heard amongst garden parties in Washington, D.C. Not a season goes by for an invitation to a Williams gala. Parties seem monthly at their abode. Mrs. Williams held receptions of regal splendor. If Mr. Williams becomes Chief Justice, how insufferable will sweet Kate become? Groans become grumbles. A Williams ball may be the talk of the town, but how do they afford it? It seems, dear viewer, they cannot. It has been found that the ornate horse-drawn carriage transporting the Williams and Company and the 2 uniformed footmen were in fact bought by government funds. Whoa, is this rogue spending in the time of a recession and the bank panic of 1873? Is luxury travel now a justifiable government expense? Certainly not. But rather than capitulate to this fact, Mrs. Williams has thus accused senators of their own misdeeds. Scandal and scandal cannot be tolerated amongst the Grant administration, especially since the previous president, Mr. Johnson, was in fact impeached.
Another tarnish to Washington society cannot and will not occur. To avoid such scuffle, Mr. Williams, hat in hand, has quietly withdrawn his nomination to the Supreme Court and subsequently resigned as Attorney General. The Williams house has since been shuttered. The party is no more. And Mr. and Mrs. Williams have returned to the backwaters of Portland, where such rogue and scandalous behavior may be tolerated. Mrs. Williams, filled with melancholy for her reduced social status, was bedridden for days. This might be trouble. The last word cocktail.
Okay, what I'm going to do is oil out this cutting board just a little bit. You could use flour as well, but I prefer to do it this way because at this point you don't really want to add more flour to the dough. Just turn this out onto the oiled cutting board. And then here's the sexy part. I just like to knead it. And then as far as the technique for kneading dough, there's a lot of different ways to do it. I like to just kind of rotate it and push the dough away from me. This dough's sticky. This is a sticky dough. That's the consistency that you're looking for. When you press down on it, it slowly bounces back up. It's kind of like a sea anemone. It just kind of has that kind of going back into the dough a little bit. What you want to do is you want to put this in a bowl and cover it with plastic wrap and a tea towel and let it double in size. Depending on the heat of the house, it usually takes about an hour to do that. It could be as soon as 30 minutes, could be as long as an hour and a half. It smells so good. And then we're going to put it in a little bowl, and then I kind of like to shake it around a little bit just to get a little bit of that oil around on the sides of the bowl. Get a nice rise. Cover it with plastic wrap. You don't have to use the plastic wrap. You could just use a tea towel if you want. I would wet the tea towel first. You just want to keep moisture in the bowl. All right. See you in an hour.
Okay, let's take a look at our dough here. It's doubled in size. Looks good. We've got a 9-inch loaf pan, and we're going to push the dough out to about 9 by 12, 9 by 15, and then I'm just gonna roll the dough up, sealing it as I roll, kind of pinch the edges, like an envelope kind of thing. And then, again, I mean, it's a little sticky, but that's not a problem. And then just kind of put the loaf into the loaf pan. And then we're gonna let this rise for about another hour. So I'm gonna cover it with plastic, cover this plastic, and then cover it with a tea towel. I'm gonna set this to the side and see you in about an hour. Okay, our bread has risen for about an hour. The next step is to put it in the oven. There are a couple things that we can do before we do this. And this is really up to you as the bread baker. I found if you put a little butter on the top of the dough, it will help brown the crust, and it also will soften the crust a little bit, which is kind of what you want for a sandwich loaf. The other thing you can do is cut down a seam and get a little butter on the inside of the bread, which I'm going to do right now. So you want to cut about an eighth of an inch or a quarter of an inch down into the slice. That's going to give that kind of heart-shaped top to the loaf as well. So here we go. We're going to slice that open just a little bit. We're just using an X-Acto knife. Take some melted butter and just, you don't have to be careful with this. The other thing, the nice thing about the butter is that it's going to slide down the side of the loaf, and it will be easier to get that loaf out of the pan when we pull it out of the oven. So, and this is about a tablespoon of butter. All right, so that looks good. On to the oven. This might be trouble. It is a good cocktail. The last word cocktail. Mrs. Williams, filled with melancholy for her reduced social status, was bedridden for days. But, dear listener, her story does not end here. Rising from Washington society, rising from the ashes of Washington society, and her husband's glorious defeat at her hands, I might add, a more somber and pious Kate George Hughes appears. Such reinvention is a luxury of the West, so dear Miss Williams becomes the leader of her own pious Christian sect, aptly named Truth. Pray and be cured was their motto, though we're unsure to this day as to a cure from what. Rumors abound that cure in pray and cure may be the onset of syphilis. Case of syphilis brought upon by her previous husband's infidelity. Regardless, truth catches on, and soon the parlor of the Williams home is filled with a decent-sized congregation. As her flock grows, a doctrine is formed of purified fasts, of lengthy purified fasts, where she consumes nothing but bread and communion wine. Mrs. Williams refers to this fasting as going into the wilderness, and thus she leads the way, launching herself into a 40-day fast, going into the wilderness, where she consumes nothing but bread and communion wine. She commands, on order of God, that her followers do the same. Do the same. Do the same. Do the same. That her followers do the same. Now, Mr. Williams tolerates this action, but does not participate, so he is blameless when the practitioners of truth start dying of starvation. An inquest ensues, where it is brought to light that Mrs. Williams is claiming to be the voice of God. It may have been in response to that pressure that a few weeks later, Mrs. Williams goes back into the wilderness, this time for 110 days, where she consumes nothing but bread and communion wine. But on this occasion, in 1894, this journey proves too much for Miss Williams. And the 61-year-old prophetess succumbs to her starvation, and she brings an end to this whole affair, but bread and communion wine. Truth be told, the cocktails and last night's baking got a little ahead of me, so I let this bread cool overnight. Now for the big reveal. This is the dill pickle rye.
You know what? I like a fermented dill pickle, and these are my favorite. Moon Brine. This is the dill pickle rye. Smells so good. The nice thing about baking your own bread is that you dictate the slice. That is what you're looking for. Okay, last night's cocktail may have gotten the best of me, but here's our finished bread. Makes great toast. This is my Moon Brine dill pickle bread. Moon Brine! Spreading a little of my cheese spread on it. Holy good. Well, that is a piece of toast. Thanks for stopping by. See you next time.